So, see if the clicker works. Yes, it does. I'm sharing with you guys some pain and shame I've experienced. And sharing pain lessens the pain, is a saying in Dutch. So I hope to get rid of some of that pain. And the pain and the shame I have experienced was with hindsight related from blind spots I had. I was too much focused on the team I was in. I was too much inward orientated. And I've learned later that I need to be thinking outside in. I will explain a little later. I was too much absorbed by delivering quality. And I've learned, as I just explained, I need to be absorbed by delivering value. I need to be value-driven. I need to help myself to grow, to evolve in that direction. I've also learned that I was too much preoccupied with details, zooming in, micromanagement, looking too much at the items on my backlog and worrying about them. And I was not seeing the bigger picture. So I will give some attention what I mean by that. I also come from a background where we were not all fully agile. I'm also quite a bit gray, as my predecessor pointed out quite a few times. And I have been working in projects. And what I like now from teams I've worked with, when it all comes together. So I would like to give some attention to what it means, from my perspective, would be a test-driven team. And we are also very much focused on getting it done. And I would say we are not done when it is done. We are done when people are happy. And to keep people happy and to keep them happy for a long time, we need to take care. So I will explain what I mean by taking care of your customers. So outside-in thinking. A phrase my good friend Joris van der Laan from QB, I see some cubists over here, used to say, what's happening? Is it back? It's back on my screen. I will continue anyways. Start with the end user in mind. And I like that a lot. I think it's pretty deep, it's back. We need to be more engaging with real end users. So when you see teams talking to their product owner or to a stakeholder representing a company, you don't really understand, it's breaking up a little, I keep continuing, you don't really understand what is the motivation of your end user. So whenever you have a chance as a team, as any development team, to have a real contact with a real user, take that chance, build on it, talk to them, learn from them, engage those end users. And I would say orientate your entire structure, your team toward that end user. So we talk a lot about feature teams. I would say it's probably for some of you it means exactly the same, but it's a different mindset. Build end user orientated teams. For organization, that would be turn your organization around. I will show that a little later. So value driven. We talk a lot about value in Agile, and I read a lot about value, and it is very seldom quite clear what we mean with value. And to me, value means a few simple things. So as I explained in my opening, it is about getting it right. Getting a right product for the right customer and making them happy. Making a product that really matters. And a product that matters to a customer is at least a product that is being used. It's not applicable for all features. We might have some security features we don't use, but we are really happy about it. But for most features somebody might order, I want this, I want that. And you can look in your own garage. In my garage I have some stuff. At some point I wanted it, and it's now in my garage, but I don't use it. So it's not valuable to me. So we need to understand users and usage. So that brings us from feature-driven, from output-driven, to value-driven. Understand your users and understand how they use what they ask for. Not used equals not valued. And for that matter, a new notion came to my mind quite a bit ago. that when we are involved and absorbed by value creation, we need to consider the notion of value destruction. So if you create features that are not used, and then is my quality background emerging here, you might bring in problems in the bigger game, in the bigger product. So when you bring in features that are not used, that is not adding value. But adding with those new features extra complexity can bring in extra instability, less usability. So when you don't think about the notion of value destruction, you might end there. We'll give some attention a little later to that. Big picture. The big picture is real important for me to understand. So I've seen a lot of teams, and I've done it a lot myself, looking at a user story. Technique is breaking up a little. I know most of the story from the top of my head, so I've seen quite a few teams struggle with the backlog. And the most simple thing I can tell to explain what I mean with that is that I've seen teams that in sprint 1 are asked to work on a certain feature. And in sprint 3, for example, a few sprints later, they might be asked to work on a related feature, a dependent feature, a connected feature. And so the team might say at that moment, yes, well, hey, why didn't you tell me in advance that I was working on this feature, but there is a connected feature? If I had seen that bigger picture immediately, just a short, simple sketch on a whiteboard, I would have designed it differently. I would have built it differently. So please help me with that bigger picture. And I'm going to tell you a story about Jeff Patton. I really love that guy. I love his book, User Story Mapping. I'm going to zoom in on that for quite a bit. So teams that miss interdependencies, they shoot themselves in the foot. They can hurt themselves. So we would like to have a simple, small picture drawn, engaging with end users. So I would say the user story, for me, is the start of a dialogue. So when I hear or when I read the user story, I cannot help but feeling I want to talk to the guy. I want to talk to the real user. Please explain what you mean with that user story. I need to understand. So again, I want to have users involved. Yes, test-driven team. I've been looking a lot at test-driven development and how I can help as a test specialist, how I can help teams to become test-driven. So I've talked with a lot of teams. I talked to a few guys that I see over here. What do you do in terms of test-driven development? Do you do unit testing in the way you like? And basically everybody I talk to say, yes, I do unit testing. Of course, I must, but I don't like it. It's not that I don't like to do unit testing, but quite honestly, they say it in many occasions to me, I don't like the way I do unit testing. I should do it a bit more serious. I should give it a bit more attention. In fact, I'm rushed. I run into creating a feature, and at one point, the light bulb goes on in my head. Oh yes, I need to do something with testing. And that's not really helping. And I think it's not the responsibility of the developer himself. I like it mostly if we would consider it to be a team effort. I'm going to explain that a little later as well. So testing is an opportunity for the team to learn. You test stuff, you experiment with stuff, you learn how it works, you collect data. It's valuable. It's valuable to the team, not only to the tester. So collect data to accelerate, to speed up, and to learn. And the fifth pain I experienced is when we think we are done, but that product that was delivered to help the real users is not being used. We are not taking care. So we created something we like. We had a darling. We brought that darling live, but that darling is basically crying for attention. that baby needs attention. So the notion of taking care is real important for me, and that's why I like DevOps. I like DevOps teams so much more, because the ops guys are much more aware of that bit of developing new features than the dev guys usually would be. So I will be looking at a feature usage heat map. I've looked for materials that are available. I basically created a sketch to discuss what my thoughts are in that direction. To turn all these pains and shames, those lessons learned around, I have discovered that I work with a very simple framework, and I like to call it a value-driven framework. And I suspect that most of you guys work in a similar way, but for me it helps to identify what that framework actually is. So I like to explore. I like to explore opportunities. When I need a tool, I like to talk to people that know tools. And when I talk to various people that know tools, I have occasionally I have discoveries. I discover something that might help me. So I jump from exploration to a discovery. Hey, that is interesting. I like to play with that. That's me, I'm a tester. I like to play with applications. I like to touch it with my fingers. I like to experiment with those applications. So experiment is the third thing I do in the pattern I've recognized by myself. So if I go from exploration to discovery to experimenting, I will find value. Value will emerge. Sometimes it will be limited value. Sometimes it will be a lot of value. So there is my value-driven concept. Now, the first notion I was addressing, that first pain bit, the outside-in thinking, I was missed. So for me, it was a blind spot. I was thinking too much inside. I was looking too much at the team I was in. How can we improve? What can we do to bring more value to our customer? And I was not thinking outside-in. And outside-in thinking is start with the end user in mind. Step into his position, step into his thought process, and think back into the organization. And what I've did over here is I started with the traditional hierarchy that you might know, the organization structure. I now work for Shell. I'm not going to sell this notion to them anyways. I'm not even going to try. But I would like to suggest, as I thought, flip the organization. So the CEO should not be on top, he should be on the bottom. And he should be facilitating and supporting the entire organization above him. And then you come to the teams, the development teams. They are the drivers, they are in the middle. And they are, again, supporting the customer-facing service operations guys. The customer-facing service operations guys, to me, are the guys that have the benefit, the luxury, to have real contacts with real users. They understand what the real users is about, what is valuable to them. And when you organize your company in this way, you have the start of a value-driven organization. So you should be orientated toward your users, think outside in, and turn it around. Management is to facilitate. And the previous speaker also mentioned Spotify. I think Spotify is designed with that same notion in mind. I like also Spotify a lot. I also see that notion in less. I've never discussed with people in this much depth what it could be if we turn the organization around. So it's just a notion. I think it's hard to sell, but it's going to help thinking outside in. This is an important slide for me. When I uncovered that I was doing many things wrong, I puzzled with it, and after some time I came up with this slide. And the middle, the vertical axis in there, that middle arrow that points to the high quality, that is the most important boundary of this slide. So to the left of that boundary in the middle, that's where you not want to be. It might be that you are high on that boundary in a high quality product, and that's for me the absolute death zone. That is the forbidden zone. You don't want to be there. So if you invest a lot of time and a lot of energy with your team to develop a high quality product, but to your users, to your customers, it is the wrong product, you have wasted a lot of time. You have wasted a lot of energy, and you will absorb the pain and the shame. So my first experience, and with hindsight, I recognized what happened, was when I worked years and years ago in the harbor, the container terminals for the ECT. Those guys, the managers, decided they wanted to have a different routing system for the robots. So the robots, AGVs are they called, they carry the containers around on the harbor area. And they used to do that in a very simple pattern. So it was a circular motion. They would drive from the stacks to the cranes to transport the containers. But what happened, sometimes that circular motion came to a halt when a AGV broke up, when there was a problem, a flat tire or out of engine or whatever. So some technical guy, a technical operational guy, needed to rush over that container, the AGV, and take it away. So some manager or some group of managers decided, well, this is bad. This is hurting our operation. We lose money, we lose value. So let's come up with a dynamic routing system. They called it Dynacore. And let's introduce that because it is valuable to the operation of discharging and loading containers. So what happened is we worked for quite some time. It was a huge multi-million dollar project. It became chaotic. We were not delivering on time. They brought in some fierce project managers, real scary guys that would bang the walls and everybody scared shitless. So they pushed, and we finally got it live. So that was Dynacore, it was in production. 1 year later, I was sitting in a training with guys from operation, and this guy that was a marine operational builder, he was supposed to use that Dynacore feature, and he was asking me, hey, Marcel, what happened with Dynacore? You were all so much absorbed with Dynacore, and we worked so long for it, and I was involved in testing. Whatever happened? Whatever happened? We brought it live. You are supposed to use it. Well, we don't. When you look around, the containers are still moving in that same circular motion. So that was a huge slap in my face. I said, oh my God, what happened over here? So that is a learning. That you might think that the garbage is the spot you want to stay away from, but it is the ghost. It is the ghost you want to stay away from. That caused me the most pain. So I've learned from that experience and from other experience, I need to be away from getting absorbed into quality. I need to be really focusing on, do I understand what my user needs? And a real simple explanation I now use for companies that I work with. Now for Shell I've used it, and for DNEA. If I have a lawn, I do have a lawn, I don't have a lawn that long, and I step into a gardening shop and I explain, not completely in the right way, that I need to trim some green bits, referring to my grass. That gardening shop might want to sell me a superior hedge trimmer. And when I don't really know what a hedge trimmer does, I will bring it to my lawn and I will try to cut my lawn. So in that example, the superior product, the superior high quality product, for me is clearly the wrong product. I'm not going to be able to cut that grass, trim that green bit with the hedge trimmer. I would much rather have a mediocre lawnmower, a simple hand-pushed lawnmower without any features that would do the job for me. That would be the right product. So high superior quality being the wrong product is absolutely what I never want to experience again. I suspect I will experience it again, but this is my main pain, and this is why I decided I don't need to be quality driven. I used to call myself quality driven. When you would look at an old version of LinkedIn, you could see that. And I've taken that bit away. I am value driven. Related to value driven is of course thinking small, like that from the previous speaker as well. The smaller the value bit is, the sooner you can deliver and the sooner the value can be experienced, the more valuable it is. The bigger it is, the later. So also for me important, selling it wherever I work, please limit your ambition. Make your ambition as small as possible. It is a value-driven way to think in that direction. And please be aware that you might destruct some value. And if you destruct value, you need to take care of it. So value creation and value destruction, I try to map it out for myself to understand and absorb it a little bit better. What is my thought process in that direction? So what you want to do is gradually add features and gradually add value. So your value creation process would look like the upper arrow. And you definitely want to stay away from the lower arrow where you, by adding features over time, over releases, you might destruct your own value. But I've seen it happening. So I've seen a release go to live where not much value was added. It was the wrong product, but stability was lost, performance was lost, usability was lost, complexity was added. And if you do, you should take it as a learning. Take care of that loss of value, remove that value and redo it basically. So when you end up seeing on the right hand side, the arrow going into the red, that you lose value, remove that value and do it again. Be a big man or girl about it. So this is some picture I use when I work with the thought process from Jeff Patton, nicely portrayed. I really like the book in user story mapping. And in some way, I've experimented with this a lot at quite a bit of companies. At QB, I've done some experimentation with it previous to with Ziggo, with ECT, and much clearer, much more closer to the original thought process of Jeff Patton of user story mapping at Dunea, and I also apply it now at Shell. So I want to sit with real users of a software product. And I want to understand how does your world now look like. And I always draw a big arrow somewhere on a wall, on a whiteboard. The arrow is reflecting a process we are talking about. The process always starts with a trigger. What is the trigger? A customer calls, and it ends with an objective. Why do we do this? And that objective, of course, should be valuable. So then I ask one of the more knowledgeable users, please explain the bigger picture. Please explain your big story. Explain the backbone. What happens? The trigger is there, and what happens? What do you do, and what do your coworkers do? So they have their story told, different user stories, and we map that out. We make that backbone of the user story map. And then I would say, okay, this is your world right now. Can we have a short brainstorm sessions? I'll give you some time, let's say 5 minutes, and try to think of the user stories that would make your life happier, that would be valuable to you. And then hand over the user stories to me, stick them on the board, or I will stick them on the board, and then we discuss the IDs that you might have. And various users might have various IDs, and they can be shared. So we create a map of improvement IDs. And we discuss a little bit further. We can identify an MVP in that map. We can identify the minimal valuable product. And I would like to call it the most valuable minimal viable product. So this simple picture explains it, and in practice it can look in any way. But the way I work with that big picture creation is something like this. I saw a signal I need to speed up a little. So I will skip over this bit. But this is how I used the process of user story mapping connected with a specification by example from Gojko Atsik at Dunea. So the Dunea enterprise architect came up with a series of process flow diagrams You can see them here on the left. They wanted to improve upon. So I said, let's do a user story mapping session. Few people, and let's talk about it. What do you guys envision as an improvement? So we came up with, okay, we got some repair. I will continue. So they came up with some user stories, we mapped them, and we uncovered, we learned what the MVP was. That was on the top of our backlog. So we didn't have much attention for the entire backlog, of all the IDs that could be entered on there. We just looked at a few user stories, connected user stories, and we call that the MVP. And then we start specification by example. Please provide your usage examples. That was the next bit. I hope I can continue. Yes, I can. I see my screen now, but I don't see it over here. And this is breaking up my story a bit because I wanted to show a picture of a photo I found in Google. So if you can help me out, that would be appreciated. Is there anybody that recognizes what this object is? Well, I won't wait too long. It is a wind tunnel. It is an early prototype of wind tunnel, and it was created by the Wright brothers. I think it was the secret weapon of the Wright brothers. Of course, we all know them of the flight machine they created. And how they did that is not completely understood. But we know that this was a secret weapon they used to collect data. So with this simple wind tunnel, they had it in a garage or something like that. They collected data on behavior of wings and propellers. And with that accurate data on wings and propellers, they learned stepwise what better propellers were, what better wings were. So they had a test-driven approach. As the entire development team worked on the plane, worked on the wings, they collected data, and that data that drove them in the valuable direction. So that notion I would like to share with you guys. Bring testing to your team, not to your testers only. Do it as a shared approach. Now I'm going to speed up a little. I see 5 over there. So my next thought was we should extend the CI/CD pipeline a bit further if we are really interested in taking care of customers. So I would propose to have an additional slide, an additional screen next to the development teams, not only a big screen with your CI/CD pipeline. I would like to have a screen also with a continuous feedback and a continuous cleanup screen. And I'm gonna step as a side note to what I uncovered recently at Google. So Google has apparently a Google graveyard. And this is to me so awesome, because this is their wall of shame, basically. But they present it real proudly. So we have, as a company, we have developed lots of products, but many products are not in use anymore. So we put them in the graveyard. And as you can see, it all looks as a bunch of gravestones, and there is some pride in that. So my notion, the CI/CD pipeline, I will skip for now. I assume you guys are all aware with how that can look, is to extend that pipeline. Is it all breaking up? With a continuous feedback, continuous cleanup screen. So my idea is, and this is just a sketch I made earlier this week, that we have user-orientated teams. And ideally, it would be a touch screen. So if you're involved in team focusing on delivering value to persona A, you click on persona A and you see the features that are real valuable to that persona A. And when you see them in the green, you can see that that feature is actually being used. You can collect that from operational data. Tools like Splunk might help you in that direction. And that would be so awesome to me. You also could see what are the dead features for that persona. And it might even be that for all personas, when you click across the personas, that there are some features in there that are dead to all personas. You want to remove those features. You want to clean up those features. So such a visual would help you to identify what features need to be cleaned up. And as Google impressed me a lot with their Google graveyard, I would like to propose a new ritual we should only do it a few times a year. We should do it a bit festive, a bit with pain and a bit with a tear. And I would like to present the feature funeral. So yes, well, if a feature is really not used and it is adding complexity, let's decide to remove it. Let's rework it for my part, but let's remove it for now. So we do that a bit festive. We do it in a feature funeral. This is my experience at ECT. I think time is running out. So this is basically a different way of how I used to create a big picture to understand what it was all about. And I'm not going to explain this in depth, but that big picture, that helped a lot. It got distributed across the company. This is what I uncovered working for QB. I see some QBists over here. And Jorrit van der Laan promised if I would promote QB, he would buy me a big beer. So I might say QB a few more times, QB. So then we learned at QB that you have you can have a map where value is in the one direction and complexity is in the other direction. And usually they are not the same direction. This is an example of story mapping applied at Dunea. When I was away, they created this story map themselves. So I really like that. Good guys, good for you. And this is now what I apply at Shell. And it got distributed as well. Shell is not an agile company. Shell is a mini republic. Well, it's even a medium republic. It's a huge company. And it is having troubles by adapting to the agile way of thinking and the agile way of working, because it is not what they are accustomed to. So Shell needs to stay away from any type of risk. They are completely risk averse. So I don't preach to them at all, be agile, become agile. I just practice with them. I practice some agile experience with them, and they like it a lot. So that is basically my story. I speeded it up a bit at the end. And usually the orange guy or the previous guy, the orange guy asked, are there any questions? So
Marcel,
yes.
Thank you very much. We got time for some questions. About quality.
Was it all clear?
Hi. What's your name? Simona.
What if your user doesn't know what he wants?
Yes.
Good question.
Yes. Absolutely. Happens all the time. So when that happens, I ask him, how do you work now? And if you explain to me how you work now, then we can do some brainstorming. Can you think of ideas that might improve your life? Usually, when you talk in simple user stories, various ideas, and I map them on that big picture user story mapping, after some time, after an hour or so, they begin to identify what I want. They want all kinds of things, not clear. I've talked to users that say, yes, 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 I can think of 1,000 things I want, so I don't know what I want. If that's what you're referring to, absolutely try user story mapping. Look up the book. It's awesome stuff.
Okay, thank you. Another question. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. A warm round of applause for Marcel.